Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today at Expedition Networking, we have Mitch Beinhaker. He is a business, law, and estate planning attorney. He runs a solo legal and consulting practice. He represents small business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals. And he's been doing this for the better part of 29 years. So he's handled all sorts of things like business development. Of course, he's a solopreneur. There's marketing, there's firm management. He touches it all. Through that, he has also started up a podcast, the Accidental Entrepreneur Podcast, and that was part of how we had connected. It's kind of interesting because we got on a call, and he knows people I know, and I know people he knows, and it's just try to keep it all straight. You need the backside of a napkin and a pen. But Mitch, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me.
As I mentioned before we hit record, you go to law school. I went to law school. You went to law school.
Right.
They don't talk about being a solopreneur. Something totally different. And I tell the story in my experience that, when I went into solo practice years ago, I don't practice anymore. I had no idea how to get business.
Of course not. They didn't teach us that in law school.
No. They taught us about the rules of civil procedure. I was telling my son this the other day.
The professionalism in law.
Yes. Code 368 of the Internal Revenue Code, which allows you to exchange stock for stock tax-free. I said, I've never seen it. Right. We spent a month on it in law school. I've never seen it. I know nobody who's ever seen it.
Right.
Yeah. So, how did you get to this point?
Yeah, sure. Networking plays a big part of definitely a big part of my career. When I was coming out of law school in 92, it was a tough time. I had friends taking per diem jobs for $20,000 a year, and I forget what I ended up doing. I think I went to work for insurance companies in those days because I wanted to learn how to sell. I wanted to learn how to prospect. But there was a book being passed around, How to Start Your Own Law Firm. And people were like, why would you read that? Like, you're going to go get a job. So, and I'll go backward, but now we're 29 years later, and there have been a lot of studies on, if you look at the general legal population in the United States, there's about 1.4 million active attorneys in our country. Mm-hmm. Of them, about 80% of them are either in solo practices or 2 to 5 men shop, which is very often just people sharing space together. They're not really a law firm. The corporate law, big law, government, it's just a very small portion of what we do. And if I think a lot of people would make some very different decisions if they were told at the beginning, hey, you should know you're probably going to end up in solo practice or in a small law practice. And a lot of us are not prepared. I have friends that leave the bigger firms and they're out on their own and they got these clients. I'm not sure what that means. And they, and they don't know what to do. I don't know. They read the E-Myth for lawyers and they start out looking around. So back in it was probably around 2001, right around 9/11 or a little bit before then, I moved to a place which is nearby my office now, which was an insurance agency. And I was doing a lot of estate planning there and business planning. And I even had licenses in those days. I had to make a living. So I would sell insurance and financial products if I had to. I had it disclosed. I would do wills and trusts on the side or whatever. But slowly but surely, my law practice became so busy because I was doing work for the financial advisor's clients. So later on, I dropped my licenses. But there was a guy, I got an email or something from one of the agents that said, hey, they're having this meeting down the road with this company called Network Plus, which doesn't exist anymore. And the guy died in his 50s who started it. Nice guy, this guy, Ted Foderos. But I went, it was at the local pub. It was a bar at a golf course. It's still there, but it's probably changed hands 16 times and has different names. But in those days, it was called Lana's. And I went there not knowing what I was doing. And I get there, and there was a gentleman named Bruno. I'm still friends with Bruno. And Bruno is in the title. He's an attorney, but he was in title at the time. He had a title company. Mm-hmm. And we started talking. And he said, what do you do for networking? And I said, what's that? Now, in the insurance world, financial world, they talk about prospecting. They talk about referral prospecting. You go, you meet with you, Frank, and your wife while you're going through the process. You ask you all kinds of questions about your life, who you love, who you care about, your children, your brothers, your sisters, and you try, politely so, hopefully, to get introductions to other people in your life to keep growing your business. And referral prospecting works very well for people in certain industries and so forth. But as a lawyer, it's not really ethical, at least in New Jersey, to prospect that way, right? Yeah, now, I could, and people might not mind it, but if somebody filed an ethics complaint, they could really jam me up. So as a lawyer, networking and marketing and content marketing, all that stuff, which has gone, it's really jumped through hoops now to where we are today and what you can do online. But back then, remember, this was around 2000. The internet's been around like 8 years. Probably took me 4 or 5 years to even know what it was at the time. And it was different. So in those days, I met with Bruno and he said, you don't know what marketing is? I said, networking? I said, no. Have lunch with me on Tuesday and I'll teach you about it. So we had lunch and he explained to me that networking is about, not necessarily about you and I doing business together, but it's about who can I introduce you to and who are the kind of people that can feed your business and who can you do that for me? It's a giver's gain relationship. There's no coincidence that's B&I's, Sure. Tagline. So I started with Bruno. Bruno taught me everything that I know about networking, and he's like patient zero when it comes to networking for me. From there, I've grown my network to, to thousands of people, met people even now through Zoom all over the world, but certainly within my neighborhood and in my area of New Jersey, which is where I'm admitted to practice, I would see you, Frank, who can you introduce? And let me introduce you. And we'd be passing people around all the time. And after a while, some of those connections start overlapping. And you start, somebody mentions to me, oh, I want you to introduce you to Frank. Oh, everybody knows Frank. I just had lunch with him last week. And the networks start building and start creating. Nobody's ever gotten a really good job or a really good opportunity through an ad on television or on a billboard. It's happened, but it's really kind of shot in the dark type of stuff. And if you really want to build a good business and you want to build successful relationships that are what I call sticky, meaning they're people aren't just going to walk away because they don't have a relationship with you, that you have to learn how to network yourself online, in person. And a lot of it is about consistency. We talked about that. So that's kind of how I got started. I'll answer more of your questions going forward, but it became very evident to me that if I was going to be relevant in a marketplace that is overrun with attorneys, you could stick your head out the window and say, I need a lawyer. Guys will start lining up, but they call me. So why do they call me? Because I'm involved in the Chamber of Commerce, because I go to events, because I speak, because I put content out online, because I have a podcast, whatever it is. And a lot of that's about consistency and staying in front of people. And then if they, like you said, they think of you, they like you, whatever it is, this is a combination of a bunch of things.
Was Bruno that epiphany about the whole notion of relationships?
Oh, there's no question about it. I was raised in a business where you go and you meet with somebody and your goal is to sell them maybe assuming they're a prospect for you, whatever you sell, not everybody is, and at least get 8 to 10 names out of them that they may be willing to introduce you to. And it was very uncomfortable for me when I was young, asking those kind of questions. And there are more comfortable ways to do it than not do it, but it is a little bit of a push, because really what you're doing is you're asking people to trust you, and then you're asking people to trust you with other relationships they have, and they're uncomfortable about it. But if you tell people you're looking to network with other people, they're like, oh, Bob, he's a great networker, and this guy's a great, and it's a much easier way. So it was definitely an epiphany moment. Bruno changed the way that I developed my business. There's no question about it. And it became more enjoyable too.
Yeah. That's a great story. And it's not so uncommon with, I would imagine, certainly attorneys. And that's something that people can't get their head around because everyone makes the jokes about the attorneys, about attorneys.
Well, they're true. That's why the jokes are funny.
Well, yeah, right. But the ethical responsibilities of not not calling, not advertising.
Yeah.
And it has changed. But even doing what you do, you're not going to have a billboard. Hey, you want to incorporate?
Right, exactly.
It's not going to work.
That's not the way it works for me. Yeah, I'm not looking for high volume stuff. I'm not a personal injury attorney.
Right.
I'm just not going to do that kind of stuff. So,
well, it doesn't exude the level of trust that you need.
No, not in the least.
Yeah. So you're limited, and it's just a question of trying to figure it out. And I wonder how many attorneys just fall by the wayside because they can't figure that out. They end up just being
what I call them is street lawyers. They're just bird dog in business. They get a lot of business from their other colleagues who don't do exactly what they do, which is nothing wrong with that. I get business from other colleagues too. But, Frank, when I started this out with Bruno, it was definitely an epiphany moment, and I started meeting other people through him. But it's still, for the first, 5 to 7 years, I didn't really know what to do with all these people I was meeting. I had them in my database. I had what I guess I call a hot list, where I would, hey, Frank, let's meet for coffee once a month and stay in touch, grab some eggs, whatever. Who can I introduce you to? What's going on in your world type of stuff, staying in touch. But it wasn't really until, I don't remember what year it was, but I got introduced, wasn't through Bruno, but I got introduced, I have it on my shelf, to a book called The Referral of a Lifetime. Okay, it's Tim Templeton, I think, is the author, and it's a Ken Blanchard series books, like all the other books that he's written. And it's written like a parable, like the other books. But what it did was it opened, that was an epiphany moment. I read that book, and it's all about building a keep in touch program to get the most out of the networks that you have and the relationships that you have. And general science and questioning and marketing and stuff, they basically have determined that everyone knows about 250 people. If you really stretch yourself, you say, I don't know anybody. It's not true. You walk on earth, you leave your house, you know people. So if you come up with your 250 and you market just to those 250, well, based on the premise that they each know 250, I think that comes to like 62,000 people. That's one level, right? It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, but what I learned is that if you don't build systems, if you don't create programs that allow you to keep in touch with people, and by the way, this was back, you had to send like postcards. I guess you could send emails, but emails, you're dialing in. Remember that when you dial in AOL? It wasn't exactly an efficient system like we have now. But back then, so you would send out postcards, you'd keep people on your list, you'd schedule something to go out once a month, even if it's just like, hey, happy 4th of July, whatever it was. And you'd create a system, because consistency in networking is so important. Like you and I said off the mic, you don't know who's going to need your services and when they're going to need them and if they're going to need them. So it's a question of, you get something from me, and you were just talking to your brother-in-law who told you about his best friend from college who's looking for X, Y, and Z, and he just got your email. Go, I didn't even think about that. Hey, Frank, call my brother-in-law because his best friend had this problem, and next thing you know, you're connected. But there are constant times where I need services from people, and I'm like, you know what? I spoke to a guy like a month and a half ago, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. Now, he didn't keep in touch with me. Whenever somebody connects with me, and I don't remember how we originally connected, but are you on my mailing list now?
You and I connected.
Broadcasting, you get the...
No, you and I connected through Adam Connors, I believe.
Okay, so I will add you to my mailing list. But when people schedule appointments with me through my online calendar schedules the Zoom meeting. It takes their email. It adds it to my marketing list through MailChimp is what I use.
Yep.
And they start to get a drip campaign about my practice. So it's all automated, and I don't think about it. And then going forward, the podcasting or anything else that I'm doing, speaking, I'm appearing, whatever, they constantly hear from me. Now, they can unsubscribe. That's fine. But other people don't do that, and I don't remember them. They can't leave it upon me. They don't know how many people that I come in contact with. I'm sure you can tell me too. Hundreds every week.
Yeah. Yep.
I can't remember. Now, right now, you and I are doing something. You're introducing me to a dozen people. I'm introducing you to a dozen people. Books, we're talking, whatever. But we go 6-8 months down the road, and you and I have both met hundreds of people.
Yeah.
We may not remember each other. Who was that attorney? Oh, yeah, you have something in New Jersey. Who was that attorney in New Jersey? I can't remember the guy's name. You won't forget me because you'll get annoyed from the emails that I sent you. But people don't do that, and I think they really miss the whole thing. And that book, and now it's been updated to deal with electronic communications and all the automated stuff you can do. what is got to be one of my favorite books when it comes to networking and building a keep in touch program. I mean, it is the Bible.
I do have that book.
I figured
I am on your list. I am not annoyed by your emails. It is good. Now, I will say I don't read them all.
No, but you know I'm around.
I know you're around, and I see the guests you have, and I see the topics. And, the human brain is just a fascinating thing because it sits in there. It's a limitless capacity. And when something comes up, it's like
that pops it out, right?
Yep, he's the guy.
Exactly.
He's the guy. And you're right. Systems. I have a system with Outlook, which isn't the great, it works for me.
That's all that matters, that it works for you.
And I use it, and I could do a quick search and I have you tagged in there as legal and podcaster, because those are really kind of the
right.
two
So you can find me pretty quickly. I should probably do a better job at that.
Well, and for years I didn't, and I just took some time and wanted to get more organized. But I think that's a great point in having those systems and keeping in touch with people. If you could go back in time, go back to high school, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, what advice would I give myself? My advice would be listen to people and learn, and don't think you know everything. I mean, back in high school, I was somewhat of a shy kid. Although I was very involved in the Jewish youth movement, the Reformed Jewish youth movement. And by, I guess, my senior year of high school, I was president of what at that time was the state of New Jersey's Reformed Jewish youth thing. So at that point, I started speaking in front of larger groups, 400 or 500 kids, 1,000 kids. And it got to be something I did get over. But I think that I probably would have gone a different route. I probably wouldn't have been a lawyer. I probably would have gone more into business and entrepreneurship and stuff. But in those days, the word entrepreneur was like a French word. You didn't know, what it was. And networking was not what it is today. Although ironically, some of the people that are my mentors today, the first, if anybody listens to the podcast, the first two episodes are a 2-part episode interview with a guy named Jack Killian, who ironically I met through Bruno, but I don't think Bruno knows him. I think they could pass each other in the street. They wouldn't know each other, but somehow Bruno got connected with him and told me, introduced us, and he was out of the loop. Jack's become a very good friend of mine. Jack's in his late 70s, and going back as far as the 60s and the 50s, he was doing networking in those days. Now he's doing with a pocket full of quarters on a payphone.
Right.
But there were guys doing it, and he built his whole career out of who you know and and how you close deals that way. And it's not about advertising and putting up billboards, like you said. It was all networking for him.
Well, and he's you introduced me to him.
Yeah, have you connected with him?
Yeah, he was on my podcast a few weeks ago.
There you go. Jack's a phenomenal guy.
Yeah, awesome guy.
Yeah,
author.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. He's an amazing guy. No, I totally agree. Are you connected with any of the people from the Jewish youth movement? That I can just see that as something that there would be connections there that would last.
Yeah, it's funny. So yeah, I do. So a lot of us had lost touch over the years. We see each other on Facebook, whatever.
Sure.
And then about, I don't know, when the pandemic started, a couple of us connected, and now we do like Zoom meetings once a month, which I coordinate. About 15 or 20 of us. We've all caught up. We got kids now. Some of us don't. We're living in different places, where some of us are down out of state. And we actually have one tomorrow night at 8:00, and we've been staying in touch now and getting back in touch with each other. But I definitely lost, some connection there. It's much easier to keep in touch nowadays than it was back in the old days. You had to dial a phone. You had to make time to see somebody. And I'm not complaining about it. I enjoy doing it, but it's almost more efficient now. I don't think I'm ever going to grab coffee with anybody. No offense to people listening, because I got to use up an hour round trip just to meet them somewhere.
I know.
When I can be jumping on 4 calls at the same time, but we'll see where that goes. You also need some human contact at some point.
Well, I say that Zoom, Facebook, social media is killing the high school reunion. There's no need to go back to high school.
Correct.
No.
$50
for whatever.
Right. Half the people you probably don't want to see anyway. So you
can
just connect with the people you want to see.
Well, and you know what's going on. Your kid's graduating. That's awesome.
Right. You follow them on Facebook. You see all their pictures. Yep. You're right.
So
yeah.
let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about your practice for people listening.
Sure.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is your podcast. What's it about? Who's the target? Who should be listening to it?
Yeah, we've been going about 2 years. I got about 120 episodes out, and a lot that I'm editing now. It's a interview style format like you have, and I interview entrepreneurs and authors and small business influencers and all people that work in the SMB space throughout the world. I interviewed a voice coach from Singapore and a big Instagram guy down in Australia and several people in London, and I've just connected with people all over the world. So it's the opportunity for people to share their experience, either through the work they do with entrepreneurs or maybe themselves as an entrepreneur, of what they failed, what they tried, what succeeded, what they've learned, and what they can share with the audience to hopefully keep you from making the kind of mistakes that are very common when it comes to business, whether it's startup or succession or growth and the mistakes that people made. And that's really why it's called the Accidental Entrepreneur, because people just kind of, they don't necessarily go into business accidentally. Some of them do, right? But they kind of succeed accidentally, or they fail accidentally. Usually it's more failure than succeeding. So I give clients that are referred to me more often than not, and I'll tell you more about my practice in a minute as to how I like to work with people. But I get referred people, obviously, because they got legal troubles. They have a dispute with a client. They have a dispute with a customer. They have a dispute with a partner. Their son or daughter went to college and they got sick, and they called the health center and realized that the child's 18 and they can't get access to any of their information. Or I had a guy who was elderly or pre-dementia, and his wife was taking care of him. She was younger than him by 10, 15 years. She died. He's still alive. The children live out of state, far out of state, like North Carolina, Hawaii, things like that. And no planning in place. They weren't my clients. So she didn't have a will, and it's a mess. So there's a reason they call it planning, because it's supposed to be done ahead of time. Right? So I prefer to work with people, and I work with a lot of family-owned businesses, partnered businesses. I prefer to work with them where they're on a retainer on a monthly basis for my advice, unlimited emails. I answer questions for them. Work is done at a discount, depending on their level of whatever they're paying. I put all their documents in a secure vault online. There's some emergency healthcare aspects to it for their children, for themselves, for their parents, things like that. And when they need something, I know where it is. They don't have to call me and say, my husband just passed away. Didn't we sign the will a month and a half ago? I'm like, yeah, it should be in the house. I can't find it. Well, what about your safe deposit box? We don't have one. Do you have a safe? No. So I got to go to their house and try and figure out if it's even there. And this happens all the time. Business agreements, real estate related stuff, parents on deeds from 20 years ago when they died. And people, and if you want to be successful, just like you and I know, right? You need a business plan. You got to put things in writing. It doesn't have to have charts and graphs and all kinds of financial stuff in it. It's got to have some basic financial information, but it's a working document. It's something that you work off of, just like anything else in your life. So you need to work with a lawyer, a business attorney, who can help your business grow. And by the way, I have, for example, a lot of federal tax planning that I do. You don't know about those techniques. I guarantee it. Most of the financial people I work with don't know about these kind of planning techniques because they're used by the super rich. There's an upper echelon of planners that use them. Not a lot of people know. And I don't even know myself. I work with other law firms in Texas and Florida and California and Nevada that help me set these things up. And if you're selling a building or you're selling a business, there are ways to defer and or eliminate tax, but you can't do it at the closing table or 3 months after you sell the business. You got to do it ahead of time. So I'm in the position to bring planning techniques to my clients because I know their situation. Now, if they're out of state, I do a lot of business advising. I can do it as an advisor. We just have to get an attorney to implement these things. I work with their local counsel, but that's how people get the most out of me. And those are the most valuable relationships that I have. And it's all because people do things like ad hoc by accident. Like, oh, I got a problem. Let me call a lawyer. Well, the lawyer wishes that he met you 4 years ago and wrote an agreement with your friend because now you're fighting over things. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Contact you through LinkedIn. Best way to.
I have a profile on LinkedIn. The podcast is on LinkedIn. My website, Beinhakerlaw.com. Very easy to find. I'm even on Facebook and Instagram, but I haven't looked at my profile in a while. It just gets posted automatically.
Gotcha.
The systems I use, but people message me, Messenger, whatever they want to do. I'm very, very accessible.
Okay. Well, again, appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate you having me.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.